Thank you everyone for coming out. I see a bunch of smiling faces, so the nerves are like melting away. Thank you. Also need to thank the Idea Fund. Blya and I approached the Idea Fund talking to them about an discussion that we've had for the past 3 years. When I met Blya in grad school, I was immediately intrigued because I had not met anyone from Cote d'Ivoire, which is the Ivory Coast in the west coast of Africa. And I was intrigued. I like knowing people from different places and learning about their cultures and learning so much about others. I don't look at differences. I try to connect with people on where we meet and how we are alike. And so when meeting Blya, we start having conversations immediately about food because that's my second favorite thing next to art. And we talked about food, and we found that so much connection between food in West Africa and food in African American South and African Americans in general. And so we were connecting on that and all these dishes and different plants. Then we start talking about Ashanti houses, which is a West African home design that has higher ceilings, pitched roofs, and these designs have been made for efficiency and thinking about the cooling off of the home. So talking about that and having these conversations, it was like a weaving. It was like we were weaving a basket of thoughts, memories, because I would think about things that my family had passed down. And so we were able to combine our thought process and bring it to life. And I'm so glad Dennis trusted us. At any rate, a little bit about myself, Kat Martinez. I'm a steel sculptor. I work with steel and fibers, and I have an affinity for welding. I didn't know where that came from. Having conversations with my mother afterwards, showing her art pieces that I had been doing, she it brought up memories, and she had a conversation with me about my grandfather, who would talk about a language that his grandfather taught him. It was Benin. He was from Benin. He was a metal worker from Benin, and I just immediately felt like maybe the ancestors are speaking to me. I don't know. At any rate, as I kept working, I just kept finding language through the material and kept making language through art. And so my contribution to our discussion is this piece, which is called Smith's Lineage. My great-great-grandfather's name was Smith Summers. He was a blacksmith on a plantation in Claiborne County, Mississippi. And he was brought here for his ironwork and used as an enslaved person for his ironwork and being a prized blacksmith. At any rate, working with metal, steel, and even joining the Houston area blacksmith club, it inspired me in producing things and my affinity for architecture. Really love architecture, and so I can get in a rabbit hole about that. But with our cross connections about food and also the piece here in the center with the rocking chair, I talk about home and family and the embroidered pieces on there. But talking and connecting with that, Blya and I connected. And so she will tell you and talk to you a bit more about our connection.
All right, hello guys. Hi. So yeah, thank you, Kat. First, I do want to thank Dennis. Thank you so much for trusting us with this. Had a great time working with you. And like Kat said, you guys are seeing basically years of conversations come to life. Because ever since Kat and I met, we have been talking about cross-cultural kids, so living in different countries and being in between two different cultures, and just the history of African Americans and Africans and how we connect. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about certain pieces. I want to point out the video. So typically that would be the kitchen area of a row house. And again, like Kat said, the structure, the history goes back to Ashanti houses in West Africa. And then it was brought over by Haitian slaves, and then Louisiana, and you see row houses all over Houston now. So that is a mother-daughter piece, and we are making a dish called fufu. It's not the popular social media fufu that you guys see from West Africa. And that piece, it really speaks to me because of the parallel of me working with Kat, and Kat is like, we are two different generations. She's basically my art mom. And so having a piece in here that includes me and my real mom making food versus me. And the video is pretty funny. It's all in French. She talks about how making fufu with a blender makes it not taste good because he's just like, that's the wrong way to make it. You have to make it the traditional way. So the traditional way with a moto pestle from Ghana, because she is Aka. So she is making it like that. And meanwhile, I'm in my kitchen using a blender. So it does go back and forth between the two kitchens. And it has her voice over the whole time. And I did want an ambiance of a real kitchen, a real environment. So my siblings did not know I was filming, but you do hear them in the background laughing and talking, asking questions. But yeah, at the end of the video, um, she says, "Oh, I'm so tired." It's a long process. It takes like 2 hours to make the food, especially for a family of 6. So, and I take the food and I start filming it, like taking pictures, because I'm like, the camera has to eat first. And so, so she's there like, "No, bring me back my food," and it's just a fun piece. But yeah, it adds to the rest of the work. Like I said, when we're talking about being cross-cultural, living as cross-cultural kids and people and immigrants here in America. I have this piece here that's a little more universal, but these include, it's called No Borders, Just Windows, and it talks about immigration, and it includes window um, views of me taking flights to different places that I've called home over the years because I studied abroad in France. I went to Portugal. I lived in Ivory Coast. I was born there, came here when I was younger, and even coming back and forth from Philly to Houston. So that's that. And then my grandmother's plantation and actual photographs I took in Ivory Coast in my trip in 2021. Revisited that trip and made a collage. And I have familiar faces that I see in the audience. So shout out to you guys because I am a photographer and digital media person. So I chose that medium because I also get to interview and include other stories and people because my story, I feel like the in between kids, our stories are very dynamic. And so I did interview Hala here in Alea, and also another friend, Emanuela, and you can hear their stories. Alea's parents were refugees from South Sudan, and now she was born and lives here. We talk about that and how she has lived in Cameroon, lived in France, is a citizen of France, and now she's here. And so it's like a whole like dynamic too. So yeah, and then more stories in the back of the clothesline of bringing all the stories together. So you guys can scan the code for the piece in the front that includes the podcast. And in that podcast, I asked them to list items to make a still life. And so I made a still life portrait of myself using different items that I relate to. And then the traditional kente fabric usually has symbols in it. And I replace the symbols with that lined still life that I made of myself, which is that fabric outside. And you see my parents, my dad and my brother wearing a tie with the same fabric. So that's pretty much the whole show. And yeah, let us know if you have any questions. Okay, so like Dennis said, all this work is new, basically. But instead of that piece in the back, that is part of my thesis work. So what I did was interviewed and sat down with 2 African American women and 2 African women that live here in Houston now. And the women didn't know each other, but I know them, so I brought them together, and we had different conversation surrounding home life and um, microaggression, just like a lot of different things, culture, everything. And the biggest theme was sisterhood, really. And so that clothesline is basically a visual of those conversations that we had. So these women in the clothesline, they don't know each other at all, but they met through the conversations we had for my work, and that's how we ended up with that clothesline. So it really embodies what to them African American and living, being American means in America. They said, well, as and this is from Crystal said this because she's African American and she feels like um, it's basically African culture, but because of slavery and how things had to be watered down, it changed a little bit. So you do see a mixture of just like regular clothes and then like traditional African clothes and different stuff in there. But that's what it is. It's a clothesline of our stories. Oh, typically, yeah, it would be like the front of the house. So yeah, the shutter would be right there.
I think the title is very telling of the Shutter 2, the title.
Oh yeah.
Yes, the
Oh, so
shield.
this shutter piece is called Shield of Faith, and it just talks about the importance of religion in both cultures. And I talk a little bit in the description about Harriet Tubman and how she freed so many slaves. And she talks about how she had visions from God to help her and stuff. So it's a reference to the armor of God, shield of faith, but it really is a visual of the connection that both Africans and African Americans have to religion.
Yes, so I went into a rabbit hole when it came to architecture. The gingerbread trim is multifaceted, and a lot of the trim that you'll see on historical homes in the South, and sometimes further past the Mason-Dixon line, these details are called gingerbread trim, and it's a combination of multiple cultures. So you're bringing in European culture for these attributes to the home. You're bringing in, some of those European cultures are German and Polish and things like that. And the significance of this particular one that I chose to repeat also lies in my visits here to the Rosenberg Library, learning the history of Galveston even further, because I love Galveston. And so I went into an antique shop, and these were the shape of a bracket for an antique sink bracket that was in the late 1800s. And I used the pattern of that sink bracket and I repeated it all over the home. And I just really like the pattern, and I really like paying tribute to the multicultural, once again, many cultures, in making up this home. So that's what the trim is.